Okay. Okay. I hope everybody can hear me okay. All right. Why don't we get started? How to save money and save the planet at the same time. So my name is Tom Coleman, as was indicated. And really, this is about the picture on the left-hand side of the screen where you see the family. It's about families and it's about money. And so as we go into this, the Climate Reality Project is a national organization based in Washington, D.C. It's in 192 countries, 11 branches, 14 G20 countries, and we have 120 local chapters. The Chicago Metro chapter has 664 members, and 40% in Chicago, 40% in the suburbs, and the remaining 20% is around the country in different places. So with that, our focus is about clean energy, so with a focus on electricity, clean electrification, which is broken down into two different areas, transportation and home electrification. We also focus on nature-based solutions, such as agriculture and regenerative agriculture. It also includes trees, forests, and things like that. And then we also focus on the money pipeline. Anything to do with money, money talks, right? So today's agenda, we'll get into our challenge. If we don't understand the challenge, then we don't know how, we can't appreciate the solutions. So that we'll start off with that, and then we'll get into the clean electricity, transportation, and home solutions. Then we'll have a short look at the transition plan. With that said, we should ask the question, why should a typical American worried about holding on to their job and providing for their family get invested in protecting the environment? As we look at this picture here, we see the curvature of the Earth from space. And as we look at this, we see this thin blue line above that curvature. And that thin blue line is the atmosphere. The atmosphere goes up about 62 miles. And actually, the first 5 to 9 miles is most of the major part of the atmosphere that we breathe. So it is really quite thin. And when we look at the greenhouse effect, comes through from the sun, through the atmosphere, and warms the planet. And some of the infrared rays do bounce off the planet, go into space, while other rays cannot get out. And the reason is because we have small amounts of carbon dioxide and methane and other greenhouse gases, which act as a warming blanket. Now, we've known about this since 1907. Actually, the properties of CO2, carbon dioxide, were known in 1852. But by 1907, we had a clear understanding of the issue. Now, this is a good thing. I don't want to make it seem like this is a bad thing. It is a good thing, and we'd be dead if we didn't have such a thing. And we've had balance over the years. But in recent years, there's been some instability with this as carbon is built up. So historically, you can see this carbon balance here. You can see on the left-hand side, the emissions, plant respiration, animal respiration. You know, we breathe in oxygen and nitrogen. We breathe out carbon dioxide. That's a good thing. But as we go down the list here, soil respiration, volcanic eruptions, and wildfires. Now that's balanced with photosynthesis, where plants, absorb emissions, ocean absorption, land absorption, and the carbon that's absorbed forms organism decay and plant and animal decay and mineral weathering over time. And so what happens here is that forms layers in the earth over time, which in a sense we dig up in the form of coal and oil and natural gas. Now, again, that sounds like a good thing. It is a good thing, but in the last 100 years, we've really been emitting a lot, especially in the last, and it's building up in the atmosphere. So let's take a look at that. You can see here, as we dig up all that carbon that's been absorbed, when we had a balanced situation about 50 to 100 years ago, it's become unbalanced because of our anthropogenic emissions, which is human-caused emissions. Now, is it real? So these emissions that we have are growing quite fast. And how fast is it? So if we look at this picture here, you can see the red line, which are annual carbon dioxide emissions. Now, we could be looking at methane emissions, but I'm just showing you one chart, carbon dioxide. because that's the most prevalent in the atmosphere. And you can see in the red line how it's up to about 42 gigatons. Now, a gigaton is 1 billion tons, to give you an idea how big that is. And a ton is 2,204 pounds. So that's made up of mostly fossil fuel carbon. So when we put gas in our car and we burn that gas, out the tailpipe are two things: pollution in the form of carbon monoxide and other gases, and carbon dioxide. Now, also, the mixture is land use. So as we cut trees down, let's say, to build golf courses or build homes, good thing, but it removes some of the emissions that of the absorption that was in the previous slide that was in the balance. So one thing it's important to understand is that CO2 will last up to 1,000 years. A lot of people think it's like pollution. If we stop doing it, it'll dissipate, it'll go away, but it won't. Now, some of these emissions like methane, they do deteriorate after about 20 years, 60 years after they've been emitted, but CO2 isn't like that. So if we go several centuries into the future, it's going to be just as powerful what we emit today, 300 years, 700 years from today, up to 1,000 years. So how does this look? How does this buildup happen? So we look at the chart on the left and we look at the black line, focus on the black line there. You can see that would be the carbon emissions. I can point to it for people in the room, but about 290 parts per million, the black line, and how it goes up, how it's gone up over time. And you can see that it's about, on the index, it's about 425 parts per million right now. So in other words, it's cumulative. If it goes up, if we emit, it goes up, it stays up. So every day we add more to what's already there. So that's really the problem that we're facing here. And so when we have carbon dioxide and it builds up, and now we look at the blue line, the temperature rise, and we see that it's correlated. The light blue line is correlated to the black line, which says as carbon dioxide builds up, the temperature of the Earth is building up as well in proportion, or see in a similar way. So the other thing we have to look at is the impact of this. Now, I could go on for many slides, but we don't have time here today, except to say that according to EPA right now, in the 60s, we had about 2 major heat waves per year, which is now over 6, and they're more powerful and they last longer. That's some of the impact. Now, we also heard on the news that on July 26th, it was the hottest day in history, and the very next day was even hotter. So let's now look at oceans for a second here. Now, if the black line that goes across where it's labeled 0, if we look at that black line and say between 1971 and 2000, if that's the average, you can see that in 1965, the oceans were cold compared to the average. So what's important is how we compare things to the average. What is happening versus the average? So you can see it about right about 1985 or so. You can see the various lines rising above 0, which is the temperature of the ocean up to 6,000 feet down. And so the different color lines are just simply different organizations like NOAA that are capturing and recording this particular information. So that's the oceans are heating up. And the other thing is when they heat up, we have glaciers and so forth melt. We have ice sheets that melt, and this goes into the water and raises the sea level. And when the oceans also get warm, they also get bigger. So you can see, again, 0 is the average. And we can see from 0 what has happened since 1880 on up to today, basically, on how the oceans have, how much it's rising. So the impact of this is huge. So we have extreme weather disasters now globally, $2.5 trillion in the last decade. Prior to that, the prior decade, it was, it's almost let me say it another way, it's almost $1 trillion higher than the previous decade. And then if we look at the United States, we're about 1 trillion over the last 7 years alone. And if we go away from greenhouse gases just for a second and look at pollution, which is toxic, okay, it's poisonous versus greenhouse gases, which affect the weather. So, as much as 7 million people die every year related to causes of death, according to the World Health Association. And the Lancet, very respected organization, says it's really closer to 8 million people per year. You get that shot? Okay. And then now we look at pollution in the United States. 119 million Americans live in places with failing levels of pollution, specifically black carbon, or PM 2.5, it's called, pollution. You can see there, I hope you can see the Cook County is at the leader of the pack, and DuPage County is right behind that. So it's really affecting everybody, about a third of the people in the United States. Now, everything that I've said so far, is it real? Is this really happening? So what is the scientific consensus of this? Well, the scientific consensus is that about 97% of scientists say it's absolutely real and it's a serious problem. So we look at this, we see the American Medical Association, we see the American Lung Association, National Academy of Science, etc. And I don't need to read them all. You see NASA, NOAA, everybody's here, and the European Energy Agency as well. Now, with that said, we look at what are we going to do about this? What do these scientists recommend we do about this? You can see with the buildup, the black line, the buildup over time, we get to the point where if you look closely at the very top of the black line, you see this little dip for a second. That's the pandemic. So remember how much of the world slowed down and almost stopped. Well, it really didn't stop, but emissions did go down worldwide, a very small amount. And it's now rebounded, of course. So what do we do about it? Well, in order to contain those emissions, you can see there are various scenarios. Right now, today, if we implement the policies that we have, the temperature of the Earth will go up about 3.2 degrees Celsius. That's around 7 or 8 degrees Fahrenheit above where we are today. So that's almost a doubling in the anomaly in terms of the heat. Okay, so when we say many parts of the world are really baking today, especially in the summer, of course, expect that to double based on current policies. Now, if we focus on our commitments, if we execute our commitments called NDCs that came out of the Paris Climate Agreement, then it'll be about 2.4 degrees, which is not quite two times the amount of heat that we have today. And of course, the Paris Climate Agreement says we really need to get it down to 2 degrees Celsius of warming or less. Closer to 1.5 would be the objectives. So that's kind of the objective that we have with all of this, okay? And so going forward, that's kind of the objective on renewable energy and different things like that. Now, who's responsible? Now, many sustainability organizations are, shall we say, critical of, let's say, the fossil fuel industry, the Exxons, the Chevrons, the Nicor gas. And it's understandable. The thing is, they're only responsible for about 12% of emissions. Because you see, when they produce these emissions, they don't burn them. They produce them. So there is emissions with, fracking and different things like that. There's emissions, but they're not responsible. The people that are responsible are the people that are actually consuming, the people that are burning the coal, the people that are burning the gasoline in their cars. So we have to look at ourselves, we have to look at our homes and our businesses and the types of things we can do to deal with this problem. All right, the good news is over 425 companies are getting really serious about this problem. And you can see in this picture here, all the different companies. I mean, Deloitte, Mars, Kia, lots of great companies are in this picture. And that's really good because we need companies and, people like us to focus on this issue and take it really seriously. And, it's like one of these issues, it's kind of like Stephen Covey said a long time ago, many times the most important things are not the most urgent. Well, actually, this is one of the most urgent things we can do, but it doesn't feel that way every day because it's a long-term, catastrophe building. So now we should look at, let's say, What do the financial industry say? What does McKinsey and Deloitte, and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, EY, Forbes, and Bloomberg? Well, they all have programs to reduce industry, and they, they differ. The companies differ, but they're all in that climate crisis is real. It's getting serious, and we got to deal with it. Let alone Apple and Microsoft and Stanford University and Harvard and MIT. There's really no disagreement on this issue. So I guess we could zoom out for a second. The biggest hedge fund company on the planet is Bridgewater Associates. And Ray Dalio says the costs are really in three buckets. The first is the damages if we don't do anything. The damages of what's happening today and how that could get worse if the planet heats up anymore, which of course it will to some extent. It's a question of how much. So the damages. Then there's adaptation, such as building seawalls in New Orleans, or else the city goes under. Then there's mitigation that gets at reducing the root cause of the problem. So I came from manufacturing. If you don't deal with the root cause of a problem in the factory, you don't solve the problem. You're dead. You're not getting anywhere. So what Ray is saying that this is a $5 to $10 trillion problem, and as much as 5% of GDP is the impact. So this is a serious financial issue for those that are conservative and concerned about this. So the question is, what do we kind of do? So I'll just wrap up the challenge by saying we have to deal with this pollution. It's not a choice between jobs and the planet, like the CEO of Exxon would like you to believe. We can and we must do both. The cost will be higher if we don't deal with the problem, and our well-being of our families, especially our children, are going to be increasingly devastated if we don't deal with the problem. We have a steeply growing crisis, and it's kind of like momentum. It has momentum. If we didn't emit a thing today, what we've already put into the system, okay, is going to cause warming for a period of time before it tapers off. And the taper off part is a long, long time because we're talking about CO2 lasting a long time. So fossil fuels also will not stop selling us their products as long as we keep buying them. So part of this is, what can we do? What's our role in helping to reduce consumption of that stuff? So the need for change is really kind of on us. So now I want to get into the solutions for the rest of this presentation. First, to grasp the solutions, we have to grasp where the emissions are coming from. Now, there are many places we can look at in terms of the carbon footprint. We can worry about whether we should eat less beef, different kinds of food, become a vegetarian. All of this is great. Ride our bike more often, drive the car less. These are all great things that we need to do. But if we put this in terms of priority, transportation is the #1 problem in the United States. That's not true of the rest of the world, but it is true of the United States. It's a 28% problem. Hopefully you can see the chart, a 28% problem. And if we break that down, of that 28%, 59% of the problem is our light duty vehicles. It's our cars, our SUVs, our pickup trucks. It's our cars. We have 253 million of them. Now, less than half of the emissions come from trucks and buses. So it's important. It's very important. And our chapter works on both of these things, by the way. Aircraft, 10%. Now, I'm not saying an aircraft is the same as a car. Of course not. It's just that there's not that many of them compared to cars. And so we have to look at the fact that already the airline industry is looking at different types of aviation fuels to try and cut their emissions, because that's a particular really hard problem. Whereas light duty vehicles are much easier to deal with through electrification. So now let's just get into these things. 75% of the emissions can be eliminated through electrification. And you can see in the green in this chart, the areas: electricity, transportation, homes, businesses, and industry. For this presentation, we won't talk about industry, the other part of industry, like making steel. They're working on that. Or agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is a good answer. And we have teams on those things. We're going to talk about the green today because 42% of the decisions that we make At our kitchen table, the decisions we make at our kitchen table, we can affect 42% of those emissions of that 75%. So it's very significant. The scope is 253 million cars, 140 million homes. And the fact that when we put a fossil fuel vehicle or gas heating system, it lasts 10 or 20 years, 10 to 20 years, these devices. So we have to think about the next time we replace, let's say our car, the lease runs out in 3 years. We should think about and plan, what is it that we should do next time so that we do the right thing? So the next time, if we look at this, we can see that electrification is a 75% solution. And that includes electric vehicles, heat pumps for heating and air conditioning, not gas heaters, not oil burners, heat pump clothes dryers, induction stoves, not gas stoves, and heat pump water heaters. Those are the types of things through electrification. We'll talk about each of them. And if we do this, we immediately reduce emissions in tremendous amounts. I'll show you in a second. And if we do it on solar power, for example, if we can put solar panels on our roof, if we do it on solar power, we reduce it even further dramatically. And with the emissions reduction is a tremendous reduction in cost. So let's get into that. So clean energy, renewable energy is now 87% of all power being added to the grid. And the good news about this is clean energy now in the grid is already 30% of capacity. Anybody that says solar panels don't work is wrong. They work great. And in fact, it's interesting because, whether you're a red state or a blue state, some of the biggest users of solar power and wind power would be states like Texas and so forth that seem to come across sometimes as if they don't like all this progressive stuff. So I don't want to go there. I just want to mention that. Oklahoma, Florida. It shouldn't be a political thing. So if we look at the cost of coal over time, and then, which by the way is subsidized, we pay tons of money to the government, and the government subsidizes the fossil fuel industry that's making record profits. Well, one could argue that should stop, and that's another part of our chapter, by the way. But natural gas, you can see how much better, in the extreme right-hand side, how much better natural gas is on price, cost. Okay, and then we take a look at nuclear power. The most expensive. In the state of Illinois right now, we are subsidizing, I think it's 8 nuclear power plants. We're keeping them running because they're clean from many standpoints. From an emissions point of view, they're clean, right? You might not like them or you might like them, but they're clean. The problem is we're spending $3 billion over 10 years subsidizing them to keep them running, to make your ComEd bill look better. Wrong. Bad news. Wind power, one of the cheapest forms of energy. In Illinois, that's 12% of our energy. Solar power, you can see how dramatically solar power has come down. Wind and solar are now the cheapest form of energy, right there with natural gas, maybe even a little bit better. So with that said, if we look at nuclear and wind is about 22 times more popular in the last 20 years, 22 times. But now if we look over at solar, you'll see in a second, it's 470 times more popular. So you can see what's happened with solar. It's dramatic. It's fantastic. The old power plant is the Marissa plant in Marissa, Illinois, the Prairie State Energy Campus. It's a coal plant that supplies Naperville, St. Charles in Winnetka with 80% coal power. It upset me so much. I went on solar. I put solar panels on my roof to sidestep it because I live in Naperville. I'm just not going to take it. Okay, so that's what we have to move away from. Now, ComEd is a lot better in terms of their mix. 50% of our energy in Illinois is nuclear power, though. So you can say, well, that's good, but it's not renewables. It's not the kind of renewables that's the cleanest and best or the least expensive. All right, so what is? Well, you can see the panels on people's roofs there. And in Elgin, the bottom of the page here, you can sign up for community solar, and you can get energy right through ComEd, if that's your electric company, I think it is, you can get electricity right through your electric company, and they're forced to buy power from a solar farm. So if you can put them on your roof, though, you save a lot more money. But if you can't do that because you live in an apartment, well, it's a good idea to sign up for community solar, in my view. Now, of course, the wind power is 12% of energy in Illinois, which is a good thing. But is this solar thing, is this just for really well-to-do people? Well, if you look carefully at this chart, you see that solar panels are being used by people that are making families that are making maybe $50,000 to $100,000 a year. Why? Because if you do the math, it's cheap. It's really cost effective. There's an upfront cost, which is highly subsidized. Actually, it's tax credits. We'll talk about that in just a second. But anyway, it really lowers your bill over time. All right, so let's look at this. Here's an example. The average solar system, rooftop solar, would be 7 kilowatts, $14,700, 30% federal tax credit. Now, a tax credit is not a gift. It's not a giveaway from the federal government. No, no, no. It's a tax credit. Now, whether you're a conservative or a liberal, nobody wants to pay more taxes that they don't have to pay. Nobody does. So if you can get a tax credit, that's one way that you can redirect money. Instead of paying it to the government, $4,410, instead of paying it to them, they say, well, you can keep it as long as you buy these solar panels. In the state of Illinois, for that power system, they'll give you $4,250. Now, the city might have an incentive. I don't know about Elgin, but Naperville, I think, was $1,000. I didn't put it up there, but that's, our system. And then sometimes solar installers will give you a discount. So this $14,700 system is now $6,000, a real bargain. And if you have an electric car that you charge at home on this, right, it's even better bargain, which we'll get into in just a second. So how does this work? On the left-hand side, you see a house with solar panels. The sun beats down on the panels, and you use the electricity in your home. If you have extra electricity, that goes through a net meter in the center of the screen. And it's sold to the utility. You become a supplier to the utility, and they pay you for that. Now, historically, like where I live, if I sell it to them at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, that's the same amount that I have to buy electricity like at nighttime. So at nighttime, I buy it back. In the daytime, I sell it back to them, any extra that I have. And when the sun's out, you have extra, right? So there's kind of a wash in that. Now, some people, what they'll do is install a battery that you see there. So instead of selling it to the grid, they first fill up their battery. So if there's a power failure, complete power failure, they're up and running still at home. They're still charging their cars with the battery. So it's up to you. We don't have a battery. Most people don't have the battery, but that's a good thing. It's something to consider. It's quite simple. All you have to do, if you have a home, all you have to do is put your, up in the top left, enter in your address on Google Project Sunroof or one of the other ones on the internet. What they'll do is they'll have a satellite look down at your home. You can see in the circle, that's my home right there. And they'll calculate how many hours of sunlight will hit my home in the course of a year. Then they'll calculate, based on my home, how many square feet that I could use to put solar panels. Then it'll ask me, how much money do I pay for power? Now, that's when we did this 4.5 years ago, it was $125. That's because we have 2 electric cars. All right, so that's part of the bill being a little bit higher. But if it's $90, whatever it is, you put in whatever yours is, and it will tell you the size of the system you need right here, 19.6. And then it will calculate the carbon dioxide emissions of 21 metric tons, 2.2, 2,200 pounds roughly, is a metric ton. About 2,200 pounds times 21, that's how much emissions don't happen as a result of doing this. It's equivalent to 4.7 cars not driven for a year, every year. It's equivalent to 361 trees planted in my backyard. So it's a good thing to do this. It doesn't matter who you are. It's a good thing. If you can do this, this is a good thing. Now, some people I know don't have enough room on their roof because of trees, and we don't want to cut trees down, right? So they don't have enough room, so they can only get half their power this way. Well, half is better than nothing, right? Certainly is. And some people get half their power from the panels on the roof, and they sign up for community solar for the other half, which is a good thing. Now, in Illinois, the electric grid, doing this, you will save about 3.5 metric tons, 7,892 pounds, versus buying your power from ComEd. Now, you may say, hey, I didn't do it, ComEd did it. You bought it from them, you're responsible. That's the way I look at it. You may not agree with me. 3.5 metric tons, you bought it from them. You go on solar panels, it's going to be about 0.46, or it could be less. In our case, it's less. This is us. So the bill saving is about $5,300 over 4.5 years. We are producing 104% of the power that we consume. That means 4% we sell back to the city of Naperville, because that's our power company. And they pay us for that. We save 43 tons of emissions, and an emission, 2,200 pounds, about the size of a two-story house. Doesn't happen. 95,000 miles of a car not driven. 4,300 gallons of gas not burned. 643s full grown for 10 years. Equivalent. I can't plant that many trees in my backyard. It's a good thing. But whatever you do, plant trees. But I'm just saying there's lots of things you can do besides plant trees. Big things. So value of going solar is financial savings, protecting the environment, increasing the value of the home. I forgot to tell you, if you spend $14,000 and get it for $6,000, that $14,000 increases the value of your house, about $14,000. So it's almost it's like adding remodeling your kitchen. It adds to the value of your house. Solar panels do that. And they're minor warranty for 25 years. So it's not like they're going to die in 10 years. 100% warranty for 25 years. I mentioned the solar incentives already in that calculation, in that spreadsheet. And then finally, price stability, because if ComEd or whatever your electric company is, if they raise their prices, you almost don't care, because most of your power doesn't come from them. Most of the power comes from your roof. Go ahead and raise your prices. It's going to have a minor impact on me, a little bit. So in conclusion, solar dominates most new energy being added. It reduces pollution and emissions immediately. It sidesteps nuclear and fossil fuels. It retains grid connectivity for sustainable power. And net metering net metering sells excess power back to the grid. It reduces the grid energy. Some people are worried about the grid. With AI and electric cars, the grid's going to really be overloaded. Well, if you have panels on your roof, you don't load anything on the grid. It's mostly right there at home. And by the way, with electric cars, mostly charged off peak, when it's not peak anyway. So anyway, it reduces stress in the grid, saves the family's money, in my case, over $1,000, and it's the foundation for everything else I'm going to talk about right now. So the next step is transportation. It's predicted that by 2030, electric vehicle sales will exceed 2/3 of all new cars put on the road. Well, wait a minute. Norway's already at 92%, right? Iceland's already at 72%. They're already there. Electric cars are not politicized there. They're considered a good thing. In fact, you pay less taxes if you have an electric vehicle than if you have a gas vehicle, because gas vehicles pollute the air and cost everybody more money. It's kind of like cigarettes, right? Not a good thing, right? So you can see Sweden, if you go down the list, a lot of countries are getting there fast, really getting there fast. However, down at the bottom left, you can see that the USA is 9%. We're down there with Italy and Spain, not doing too good. Now in California, they're at 25%. In Illinois, we're not doing well at all. I mean, you see Teslas everywhere, but we need to do a lot better than that in order to get where we want. Because putting it on the road doesn't mean you took stuff off the road, right? So it takes time. Putting a lot of electric cars on the road takes time. All right. A few basics that are important here. EV batteries have an 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty by federal law. So some people are worried about that battery because they cost $10,000, right? Oh my God, what if I have to replace the battery? Well, get rid of the car. Don't keep it more than 8 years because it's 100% warranty by Hyundai or whoever you buy the electric car from. And that's what I say. But the DOT says, the Department of Transportation says they last as long as the vehicle, 12 to 15 years. You might lose a little range, how far you can drive with that battery, but that's about it, unless it's defective and it's under warranty. Next thing is they're 91% efficient. A gas car, for every $5 of gas you put in the gas car, only $1 even moves the car. Very inefficient. And that partly because there's only 20 moving parts in an electric car. You can see the internal combustion engine in the center of the screen. Look at all those pistons and spark plugs, tune-ups that you have to do, radiators, antifreeze, belts, all kinds of things, complex transmissions. None of this stuff is needed with an electric vehicle. It's just a simple motor. It either goes forward to take you forward or it goes backwards to take you in reverse. And of course, there's neutral. That's about it. All right, let's look at costs now. They're expensive, right? Geez, I can't afford an electric car, right? Really? Well, maybe not. Let's take a look at this situation. Here's the Tesla Model 3. Very popular. They're everywhere. And it's actually a pretty high-end vehicle, this particular Tesla Model 3. And it's $38,900 if you buy it on their website. Now, the Toyota Camry LE is the bottom of the line Camry. It's not the SE. It's not the more luxury versions. We're comparing a pretty high-end Tesla to a low-end Camry, but the Camry is very popular. So let's compare. All right. First of all, the Camry has now gone up to $28,400. So I have overridden the price that you saw on the screen, $28,400. And now I've also added the $7,500 tax credit, right? I don't want to pay the money to the government. No way. I want to keep my own money. And I want to do it to help buy a new car. That brings the car, the Tesla, $31,000 right at the dealer versus $28,000 right at the dealer. And then you can see financing, tax and title, insurance, fueling. Geez, what's that star on fuel? Fuel is $2,200 for electricity. Oh my gosh, gasoline is $8,100. Whoa. What's the next item? Maintenance and repairs, $1,200. Wait a minute. Gas car, $4,000. Why? Gas cars got tune-ups, fan belts, air filters, antifreeze, all kinds of things. Dealers love a gas car. If a dealer sells an electric car, they don't want to sell it to you. They'll try everything to not sell that car to you. Why? That's how they make their money after they sell you the car. So they make $300 selling you the car, and then it's gravy after that. They don't like electric cars. And that's part of the reason why we're having some trouble selling them, by the way, because dealers don't want to. Oops, I got to go back. So the bottom line here is if we look at the total at the very bottom, 27,000 versus 40,000. So all of a sudden the gas car, the low-end gas car is 40,000 over 5 years. And the EV is 27,000 over 5 years, considering the trade-in value, the resale value. So it's 36 cents a mile versus 49 cents a mile. Worth considering, that's all I'm saying. Check that out next time you're ready to buy a car. Now, the next thing people worry about is charging, right? They don't see any chargers. That's because there's no signs. They're in the corner of parking lots. Everybody that has an EV knows exactly where they are because the car tells you where they are. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you see my car there has 335 miles of range. As I drive the car, the miles go down and go down. So I know exactly how far I can go as I drive the car. Now, it'll be a little less in the winter because, right, you have to run the heater and all of those kinds of things. In the summertime, they go the air conditioning doesn't really hurt them much at all. Okay. But anyway, let's look at the right. That's right through, that's my car. That's right through my steering wheel on the left. On the right is my dash display. It shows me, well, I could put the radio there and all kinds of things, but now I'm showing you where the chargers are. No matter where I go in the country, I went to Providence and Boston. My wife and I never had to worry about where the chargers were. We knew exactly, and we navigated right to them. This is an example. At the Meyer, there's 2 miles away from my house, there's a charger. Here's an example of Chicagoland area. They're everywhere. Now, people that buy EVs tend to charge at home if they can. Okay. And if you charge at home, you never use them, except when you're traveling, right? So you charge where? In your driveway, in the garage. It's completely safe to charge in the driveway with the rain and snow and everything. It doesn't matter. But if you do have to charge in public, this is what it looks like. So what's the emissions look like? Well, if we charge on the average energy grid in the state of Illinois, the EV right there in the bottom left will put out 1.3 metric tons of emissions, right? A metric ton is 2,200 pounds. Okay, a year, according to the Department of Energy. That's charged on ComEd, dirty power. The plug-in hybrid is 1.8, the hybrid is 3.4, and the gas car is 5.6. Could be less if it's a Corolla, could be more if it's a big F-150 pickup truck gas car, you know? So it depends. It depends a little bit, but these are averages right here. So the ICE is 68 metric tons over 12 years. That's how long it'll be on the road. And the EV will be 15 metric tons. And if you charge on solar power, it's almost nothing to charge. It's like free gasoline. You got to pay for the panels, yeah, but I showed you that already. Right? How are they doing? How are the EVs doing? Well, this shows you 22, 23, the sales for EVs. They're really doing great. Now you read in the newspaper how they're not doing great. They're going right through the floor. Well, the right through the floor is instead of 35% increase between 22 and 23, it's 27% between 23 and 24. It's going to be 27%. So yes, it has come down a little bit because the dealers don't want to sell them. But it's doing really pretty good. And in most countries, it's doing a little better than here. Now, we don't really have too much time to spend, but here's some pictures because we'll make the PDF available to everybody. And also the library is going to make the video available to everybody. So if you want to go back on any parts of this, you can. But here's some pictures of cars. It shows you the cost of the car, such as that Tesla Model 3, $44,000 for that model, 363-mile range. That's like a full tank of gas. And with an electric car, you don't have to, but you can plug in at night, just like your cell phone. Before you go to bed, you don't have to wait until the battery's empty. You just plug the thing in when you get home. This way here, you start every day with a full battery, you never have to worry about power. So there's a lot of cars here. My wife has the car in the top left-hand corner here, and I have this Ioniq right here. And that Chevy Bolt is being replaced by this Chevy Equinox, which is out there at a $41,000, and which is about the average cost of a car now. And there's a $35,000 model coming out soon. All right, let's go on. Let's conclude the EV portion. Family budgets use money more wisely. New EVs qualify, not all of them, but check it. $7,500 rebate for many of them if they're made in the United States, yes. Used EVs got to be 2 years old. Will qualify for a $4,000 rebate as long as it's 2 years old, and a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old EV still has that 8-year battery warranty, even if it was bought by somebody else. Very good deal. Illinois has a $4,000 rebate. Now, Illinois doesn't fund it enough. So when they open it, the money goes away fast, and then they shut it down. And they say, too bad. So we're very critical of that, but it is possible that you could get it when it opens. If you're fast, if you work fast. EVs help impact on global energy shortages and fuel prices because you're not worrying about where the gasoline is coming from. Helps family breathe healthier air, less pollution. Half of pollution comes from vehicles, and then it's environmentally safe in terms of the weather. They're quiet and they perform well, and they're a lot of fun. So let's round things out with the whole now so that we can close. Heating is 30% of energy in a home. Cooling, 18%. Water heating, 14%. Lighting, 12. Washing and drying, 6. Refrigerator, 6, etc. So the principle for most of the things we'll talk about briefly is heat pumps. So heat pumps never burn fossil fuels. Everything we're talking about, nothing gets burnt. There's no explosions in the chambers of an engine. None of that stuff, right? Heat pumps never burn fossil fuels. Instead of having fire to heat up the home, what they do is they use a refrigerant and compression. Heat pumps move heat from one place to another. Okay, so your refrigerator is technically a heat pump because it takes the heat that's inside the refrigerator and it sends it out. Put your hand behind the refrigerator and you feel the heat coming out of the refrigerator. The air conditioner at home takes the heat inside your home and throws it outside. What if you could do this backwards? What if you could bring the heat from outside and bring it inside? Well, that's the principle of the heat pump. And now we have cold air heat pumps that work in Illinois because they've been around for a long time around the whole world, but they didn't work at very cold temperatures. But unless the temperature is like 30 below zero, there's enough heat there that if you compress it, it gets super hot and can heat your home. Here's examples. On the left is a Rheem heat pump water heater, 1753, and I'm showing you the tax credits at the bottom of the page. Here's the heat pump clothes dryer from Best Buy, $899. They go from $749 to $1,000. Federal rebate is $840. The heat pump HVAC, a heat pump does air conditioning and heating. So in winter, in summer, they run one way, and then they turn around and run the other way whether it's winter or summer, they can change directions as which direction the heat goes. So it's an example. There's a unit outside. It looks like an air conditioner, right? Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Whoa, I apologize. We have to go back many pages because I did a bad thing here. Page up, here we go. Okay, all right, we're back. All right, so there's a condenser outside, it looks like an air conditioner. There's a unit inside, it looks like a gas heater, but it's really not. Okay, and it can depend on which direction you want the heat to go. Right now, heat pumps are outselling gas furnaces everywhere, including the state of Maine has big programs, and there's 29 governors in the United States pushing them heavily around the country. If you go to it, you will go from about 5.21 metric tons of emissions down to 3.451 on the grid, at the dirty grid. It will reduce the emissions that much. And as the grid gets better, this will reduce. As ComEd gets better and they have more wind power and stuff, this will reduce, your emissions will go down. But if you go on solar power right here, it will be even more, as you can see in this picture. This is the same type of chart, only it's the water heater in your home. 2.23 down to 1.2, down to 0.67. Dramatic. Let's round this out with the stove. It doesn't use a heat pump. An induction stove there's no fire. There's no hot heating elements. Turn the burners all the way up. They're not burners. Put your hand on it. It's cold. You put a stainless steel or cast iron pot on that position. It gets wicked hot fast. It's the principle of electromagnetic energy that does it. All right, we have that in our home. Cooktop requires stainless steel. That's the downside. They're much more efficient. And the big thing about it is there's no pollution. As you can see here, there's no pollution in the kitchen. They're starting to find out that with gas stoves, there's more emissions in the kitchen than people thought. That's a consideration. And you can see the cost down at the bottom of the screen and the incentive. Some people, what they'll do is they want to try it out, or they're in an apartment and they can't replace the stove. They can't get the whatchamacallit, they can't get the person to, yeah, they can't get them to replace the stove. So they go out to Best Buy and they buy a single unit or a double unit burner and put it on top of the gas stove and use that instead of gas. It's a lot better. We did it because not so much emissions. We did it because of pollution in the kitchen. We wanted to eliminate that. So the culmination of all of this is electrification will take you from about 17 metric tons of all those things stacked in the bar on the left down to about 11.2. And that will go less as ComEd and Ameren start to get more green energy, which there's a lot of pressure on them to do that. And 3.83, all of those things stacked if you were to be able to go on solar, whether it's community solar or whether it be rooftop solar in your home. Okay. So home electrification cuts costs and improves family budgets, significantly reduces emissions, eliminates noxious pollution, increases home safety. Hey, you know, you see on the news, it seems like every week or so, a house totally blowing up. And, you know, you find out it's a gas explosion. There's a gas leak, and either it catches fire, it blows the house to pieces. Methane, natural gas is 85% methane. Okay, so what happens is it's highly flammable. Not just flammable, it's explosive, okay? So I'm not saying a gas stove is ready to blow up tomorrow afternoon. What I'm saying is they're starting to leak in people's homes. And what I'm saying, you don't need to worry about any of that. As soon as you go electric, that goes away. Never need to burn anything. So to sum the things up in this presentation, we're talking about eliminating committed emissions. Committed emissions are emissions from fossil fuel machines, not just the companies that sell you this stuff. From the machines that we buy that burn that stuff. That's what we want to go after, because when we buy a gasoline car, we're making a commitment to the fossil fuel company, right? For at least 8 years. And most cars are out there for 12 to 15 years. Do you want to make a commitment to Exxon and Mobil and BP? Do you want to make that kind of 15-year commitment? When we know the emissions at the beginning of the presentation are going up, and you want to do your part not to have it go up. You want to at least do your part. So fossil fuel pledge, let's move to the electrification pledge, which looks like this. As my home appliances and vehicles reach the end of their useful life, I pledge to be ready to replace them with electric alternatives and to encourage my family, friends, and community to do the same thing. You don't have to go throw away all the stuff you have. Next time you replace one of them, like the dryer, our water heater in our home, I think it's 4 years over the lifespan of the dryer. I'm sorry, the water heater, we also have a problem with our dryer, by the way, right? And she knows best. But anyway, it's over the time limit, the average time limit for the device. And so we're saying, let's be ready. Let's know all about the heat pump clothes dryer. Let's know everything we need to know about the heat pump water heater and get prepared to replace it, maybe before it even breaks, because it's going to break anytime statistically. So that's what it is. So the suggested tool list is make a list of the fossil fuel machines you have and see which ones you can replace. How old are they? What's the life expectancy? We'll send a PDF of the presentation out to people that attended this today. And in there, there's a slide that has the life expectancy. Sequence the items closest end of life. But what is the most important thing you could do now? Perhaps it's based on the emissions that are also in this presentation. What's the total cost of ownership? We have, even with tax credits, everybody has a budget, right? So maybe this year, or this year, maybe we'll look at this, replace this, and maybe next year, when the lease is up on our vehicle, we'll consider getting an electric one next time. Decide your next move. There's no perfect answers. We went with 2 electric vehicles in our family first, and then we did solar panels, but we could have done it in reverse order. There's no perfect answer. And beware of car dealers that don't want to sell you an EV for good reason. That's where they make their money. And contractors, the problem there is many of them don't know the technology has moved forward so fast that now these heat pumps work in cold climates. They may not know that. So we want to focus on the left side of the screen or the right side of the screen. We want to move from pollution and greenhouse gases and heat warming to the right. So join us, whoops, sorry. I went too fast. Join us for, join those who are using their voices, the votes and their choices to fight for the future, their community and the world, like the world depends on it, because it really does. So that's really about it. I'll just leave you this slide here that has all of the items I just talked about, plus some others for reference. So you know what the average cost of every one of these devices I talked about, what the incentive is, and links on where you can go, besides the Climate Reality Project, where you can go to find out more information upon it. It also has some things we didn't talk about, like maybe you have to upgrade your electric panel in your house or something like that. So anyway, thank you very much.